So there's this guy, and his name is Richard Wolff, and he's sort of and he's a not sort of he is a Marxist economist. It's probably one of the biggest oxymorons in my vocabulary, but he is very, very prominent among left-wing circles, among leftists, among breadtube, and such. He's seen as this sort of uh, ambassador of Marxist truth, I guess, to be hyperbolic. He to simplify, he's very, very well regarded. And he made a response video to one of Milton Friedman's videos, one of his most famous videos, where he discusses a pencil, and he looks at each individual part of the pencil and talks about how the fact that the pencil exists and exists in such a quantity is proof of capitalism's virtue.
The basic principles underlying the free market, as Adam Smith taught them to his students in this university, are really very simple. Look at this lead pencil. There's not a single person in the world who could make this pencil. Remarkable statement? Not at all. The wood from which it's made, for all I know, comes from a tree that was cut down in the state of Washington. To cut down that tree, it took a saw. To make the saw, it took steel. To make the steel, it took iron ore. This black center, we call it lead, but it's really graphite, compressed graphite. I'm not sure where it comes from, but I think it comes from some mines in South America. This red top up here, the eraser, bit of rubber, probably comes from Malaya, where the rubber tree isn't even native. Literally thousands of people cooperated to make this pencil. People who don't speak the same language, who practice different religions, who might hate one another if they ever met. What brought them together and induced them to cooperate to make this pencil? There was no commissar sending out orders from some central office. It was a magic of the price system, the impersonal operation of prices that brought them together and got them to cooperate to make this pencil so that you could have it for a trifling sum.
So that was Milton Friedman. So let's see what the Marxist has to say about it.
So let's unpack that process in Mr. Milton Friedman's imaginative story of the pencil. So first, is the market the only way for mass numbers of people doing very different things to end up with a remarkable product or series of products? And the obvious answer is, if you know anything about history, no. Human beings in communities that did not use markets have in fact produced extraordinarily wonderful, complicated outputs that millions of people contributed to.
Richard Wolff's first argument is an absolute straw man of the capitalist position. Milton Friedman isn't saying that a free market is the only way to organize a society. Nobody is saying that. Milton Friedman didn't say that. I didn't say that. Absolutely no one said that. No. What we say instead is that a free market and capitalism is absolutely the best way, not the only way, but the best way to organize the society. And we see that pattern time after time again. So the second of Richard Wolff's claims is the classic leftist talking point. It's what Marx argued in his Communist Manifesto. It's based on the idea that, if we stopped paying you to work, or stopped paying everyone to work, that things would still get done because you don't work for money. No, you work because you really, really like it. Or a better explanation would be like, people, if left to do their own passion without any rewards, will still do things, and things will still get done, and society won't crumble because people are all inherently good people whose only incentive is their own desire for a complete soul, or something like that. This is completely ridiculous, and it's refuted by every single major economic study under the roof. To quote an economic study, how does privatization affect efficiency, productivity, and technology choice? Evidence from Turkey. They looked at Turkey and the effect that privatization had on their economy. To quote their abstract, our results indicate that privatization has a positive and significant effect on labor productivity and output, while it has a negative and significant effect on per unit costs and prices. In other words, privatization increases productivity, and it decreases costs, and it decreases prices. So you might be saying, oh, well, that's only one study. And it only looked at one country. So one study from just one country can't be a very good indicator of, or a generalization of entire, or of how society should be run. And you're right. You're 100% right. You would make a very good scholar one day if you ever went into that field. So let's quote another study. This is called The Importance of Economic Freedom. Let's quote their abstract. In order to determine whether there is a connection between economic freedom and economic growth, a meta-study of all empirical research involving economic freedom was undertaken via a Google Scholar citation service covering 2,428 studies. There were 92 studies detected that dealt with this topic, out of which 86 reported positive connection between these phenomena, and only one reported a negative, while 5 others were less conclusive. This shows an unusually high level of agreement among economists that economic freedom, indeed, has a significant positive impact on the level of economic growth. Policy recommendations would, therefore, be to put all efforts to maximize the level of economic freedom in all ways possible in order to utilize the maximum this potential. So maybe, well, you know what? Maybe the free market isn't the only way to organize a society. Maybe the free market isn't the only way to make a society productive. But it sure as well seems like the best way, now doesn't it?
In ancient Egypt, they built those pyramids that have lasted longer than almost anything else human beings have done. And millions of people participated, making the stones, cutting the stones from the quarries, moving them, assembling them, positioning them, decorating them, creating the architecture to make the vaults into. I could go on. Isn't it marvelous how human beings in diverse situations did it? So you don't need a market to produce remarkable outcomes that many people participated in.
The proof that Richard Wolff uses against this claim is the Pyramids of Giza. And I looked into this, and this is not dishonesty like in the beginning. No, this is just pure incompetence. You do realize, Richard Wolff, if you're watching this, you do realize that the Pyramids of Giza were literally built by slaves, slave labor. You're trying to use the Pyramids of Giza as proof that people will build things based on their own free will, and you don't need to pay them, and privatization as an incentive doesn't work. And he's using an example of where something was built through slave labor. The Pyramids of Giza literally disprove your point, Richard Wolff. Why are you bringing them up? Oh, it's probably because he went outside when he was visiting Egypt and he saw a big pyramid. He was like, oh, look, capitalism fails. Oh, my goodness. Well, what I said wasn't entirely true. The Pyramids of Giza weren't 100% built by slave labor. In fact, recent archaeological digouts show that perhaps only 50 to 25%, or even no percent, of the pyramids were built by slave labor. So I just lied to you. In fact, the truth is actually much worse for Richard Wolff. No, the truth is that skilled artisans and craftsmen built the pyramids, and they were paid workers, paid by a wage to build the pyramids. Richard Wolff is not a very smart guy.
Number two, the word voluntary. This is this wonderful sneaking in the word, as if everybody who participates in a market doing his or her work, getting his or her wages, which is mentioned in the story, as if they're all doing it voluntarily. As almost any wage earner will tell you, he or she does some or all of the work they do in exchange for wages on an anything but voluntary basis. They have no other way to live in many cases. They either go out and sell their ability to work for a wage, or they have nothing or next to nothing, or have to become a beggar alternatively to survive, which is no real choice at all for most people. So the notion that this marvelous market is based on voluntary participation is a utopian transformation of the utterly non-voluntary basis upon which markets, particularly nowadays, rely.
Richard Wolff's next point is a fundamental misunderstanding of Milton Friedman and his presentation and what he was trying to say. Milton Friedman, in that presentation, was not necessarily arguing about the morality of capitalism. He does that very well in other presentations, and maybe I'll cover those later, or in another video. But this specific presentation wasn't about what Richard Wolff is trying to portray it as. What the specific presentation was about was to explain the macroeconomics of an economy of scale and the microeconomics of economy of scale, and to put that in simpler terms that normal people can understand. He's talking about how when you zoom in, you see an individual worker, an individual employer, an individual firm, an individual corporation. Each one of these beings are all acting in their own self-interest to all gain their own money, or to accumulate as much wealth as possible, each one of these players. And then you zoom out and you see billions upon billions of these players all working for their own self-interest, for their own, to accumulate their own capital. And a normal person will look at this and say, this is unstable. This is going to fall. This is going to crumble. This is going to implode on itself. Even people like John Maynard Keynes said stuff like this. But this is absolutely ridiculous, because when you look out and you see each individual person pursuing their own self-interest, you see instead an economy of scale. And what you see in this economy of scale is you see production to the likes that you've never seen before, where you have so much production and all these things. Even Karl Marx himself praised economies of scale with their ability to lift people out of poverty and lift developing countries out of poverty and such. He was wrong on a lot of other things, just like Richard Wolff is. But what Milton Friedman was trying to say was, look at all these people simultaneously coming together out of their own self-interest, out of their own monetary gain, and all simultaneously working and just coincidentally making something as complex as a pencil. What Milton Friedman is trying to say is to say that this fundamental misunderstanding of capitalism is, flawed and absolutely wrong. But Richard Wolff tries to portray this instead as a moral question, 100% a moral question, which I'll argue this too. He says that, Milton Friedman's characterization of each of these, of the worker and his or her working, is to characterize that as voluntary is fundamentally flawed. And, to put it quite nicely, Richard Wolff has no idea what voluntary means. To say that, because you can't do, or because if you do one thing versus another, that it's going to have a harmful consequence to you. Like, for example, working versus not working. Is that a voluntary choice? Well, working, you get paid a wage. With not working, you don't get paid a wage, and you could, quote unquote, starve to death, which is that doesn't really happen, at least in first world countries. It happens in third world countries. In first world countries, that never happens. But let's forget about that for now. To characterize that as voluntary, Richard Wolff saying, "Oh, that's not voluntary because if you don't do that, you're gonna starve to death and die. Oh my God, you're gonna die. Oh, so sad." This is absolutely ridiculous. To claim that because one choice versus another would result in great harm to you, that you don't have free will over that choice, is ridiculous. Think about it like this. For example, let's say you're walking down the road or walking on a path, and on one and the path forks, and on one side of the path is normal, on the other side giant spikes come out of the ground, and you start walking to the right, to the normal path. Did you make that choice? Do you have free will over that choice? Well, according to Richard Wolff, you don't have free will when you make that choice, because the other choice would have resulted in great harm to you. Again, this is so ridiculous. I think the best analogy I've ever seen is, for example, think of a lion. Does a lion have free will out in the wilderness? Or does he have more free will in a cage being fed by a zookeeper? Well, according to Richard Wolff, because the lion is being fed by the zookeeper, and doesn't have to make a choice like the fork in the road that will result in harm to him, that he's actually more free than the lion out in the Sahara Desert. No, that's absolutely ridiculous. No, the lion in the Sahara Desert has more free will than the one in the cage. Just because the one in the cage doesn't have to make a choice whether or not he can eat or not doesn't mean that he is more free will. We can argue day and night, oh, well, what economic system gives us more GDP per quarter? Fine. I think it's privatization. Majority of economists think it's privatization. Niche economists like Richard Wolff say, oh, it's actually collectivization, whatever. But to make these random moral arguments that Richard Wolff does, it's pointless. We should not be having these discussions. We should instead be talking about pragmatic solutions, because whether or not the bourgeoisie whether or not the proletariat are technically exploited or technically not, doesn't really matter. What matters is how we can help the poor, help the middle class, and help the upper class all at the same time. And the way to do that is through free market capitalism.
And here's the third kind of remarkable notion in all of this, that there's no directing hand. It's an invisible hand. Well, this is a charming idea of the big picture. Yeah, there's no dictator telling everybody. But inside every enterprise involved in producing a pencil, the company that cuts the wood, the company that makes the paint, the company that produces the rubber, the company that assembles them into the pencil. Here's what we got: a very powerful, unaccountable organizer, master, let's call him what he is, employer, who forces you to do things on the threat that if you don't do it how he wants it, when he wants it, where he wants it, he will take the job from you, and he will take your income, plunging you and your family into God knows what kind of chaos. Inside every capitalist enterprise is the very dictator, the very visible hand that Mr. Friedman's lovely story makes to vanish. Yeah, we don't have a dictator at the top. Instead, we have decentralized dictatorships in every enterprise.
Richard Wolff does not know what a dictatorship is. He does not know what a dictator is. He does not know what an employer is. He does not know what a company is. He doesn't know what anything is. Well, that's a bit hyperbolic. He knows what some things are. But I think I explained in my last clip why this notion that an employer is a dictator is absolutely ridiculous. I think instead, a better thing to talk about right now is how little Richard Wolff knows about the capitalist position. Richard Wolff knows very little about if nothing at all, about the capitalist position. Richard Wolff knows less about the capitalist position than your average boomer knows about the communist position. When we're talking about the invisible hand, we're talking about supply and demand. We're talking about how prices tend to meet an equilibrium that reduces shortage and reduces surplus. We're not talking about how there's no invisible hand. No, there's obviously CEOs of a company that do things with their company. No, the invisible hand is referring to supply and demand, you stupid man. Oh my goodness. But his description of the visible, corrupt, choking hand is absolutely ridiculous. No, the reason why capitalists support a company with their very, very visible hand over a government with their hand that is not visible, according to Richard Wolff. Oh, governments don't do that at all. Oh my goodness. No, the reason why I prefer a company to do it over the government is because the company is accountable to people. Richard Wolff is trying to say that, oh, companies are not accountable. People know they are. They are. They are accountable because if they don't act correctly or act in accordance to other people, we won't buy their shit. If Amazon fails, we won't buy from them. If, for example, Apple makes a horrible phone, we're going to all buy Samsung and they're all going to go bankrupt and they're going to lose their jobs. They're not going to really like that, the people in Apple, so they try and do a good job. That's their accountability. It's the profit motive that Richard Wolff and Marxists all cry about and cry so much about. What they don't understand is that profit motive is what makes capitalism so productive and great. That profit motive makes them accountable. There is no profit motive with governments. If a government screws up, well, congratulations, they can just tax us more. A government, when they screw up, nothing happens to them. They have no incentive to do right, so they don't do right. A corporation does wrong. They do wrong a lot, and they mess up a lot. But they realize that, oh my God, if we keep messing up and we keep doing this, we are going to fail. We are going to lose all of our money, and we are going to not be that happy. So they don't mess up that often, or they don't try to, or they actively try not to. A government, maybe they don't go in to mess up, but they don't really care either way. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about anything. A corporation, they don't care about me or you, but at least they have an investment in us, because if they didn't, well then we're going to take our money somewhere else. Richard Wolff, I don't know if he knows this because or if he's just trying to appeal to his base, but this is so ridiculous. Everything about this is so ridiculous. No, I mean, and this I think I've had enough with Richard Wolff. This guy is a clown, and the second that leftists and bread tube, as they call it, oh my goodness, stop talking to this guy, the sooner that they're going to actually have a platform.